The ghost of the Forbidden Forest, the Forest of Zevran, was a name most spoken only in whispers. The ancient trees weren't just tall, they seemed to lean in as if they listened. Their bark was blackened, veined with glowing blue fungi, and their leaves shimmered with static energy, humming with a quiet, unnatural sound. There were no birds, no wind, just silence. The kind of silence that wrapped around your throat and warned you to turn back. And yet someone walked there, not an alien scout in armor, not a scientist, not even a soldier, a human dot. He had no name, at least not one the records held. The few surviving reconnaissance drones referred to him only as the anomaly. Those that captured videos showed a male figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with rough garments made from animal hides and teeth. His hands were always bruised, scarred, his eyes dark, unreadable. His presence was terrifying, not because he was loud, but because he was silent, controlled. No one knew where he came from. Rumors said his pod crashed during a forgotten border skirmish years ago. Others claimed he was born in the woods, raised by creatures that no longer existed. But everyone agreed on one thing: he wasn't supposed to be alive. Levarnak Dominion, rulers of this sector, had declared Zevran uninhabitable, toxic to most life, forbidden by law. Still, sightings continued, and military losses began stacking up. That's when they sent one of their elite Kalith, a huntress of the Jade Crescent, to track and report. Kalith was not like other aliens. She had earned her name not by bloodline but by merit, surviving hunts across molten planets and killing beasts that swallowed whole soldiers. Her skin was moon silver, her eyes like burning violet flames. She could run for miles without tiring and strike a target between the eyes in a thunderstorm. She was not afraid of Zevran. At first. Using her stealth gear, she moved between branches like a whisper. She stayed high, where the air wasn't so heavy, and the creatures were fewer. For days she saw nothing. No footprints, no heat traces. Then, on the fourth night, she saw fire, not a plasma torch. A real fire, crude, primitive, but warm. Smoke rose between the trees. She followed it carefully, heart steady, tail poised. Her visor zoomed in, and there he was. The human knelt near the flames, cooking a small rodent skewered on a sharpened bone. Behind him, laid out on rocks, were strips of hide and sharpened tools made of obsidian and bone. No technology, no translation, device, nothing but instinct. She watched as he pulled a thorn from his arm with his teeth and stitched the wound using thread made of bark. When a small fox-like creature crept close to his camp, he tossed it a scrap of food and whispered something. Under his breath, Kalith didn't realize she was holding her breath until her HUD blinked, oxygen levels spiking. She tried to look away, but couldn't. The human was beautiful, in a brutal, raw way. His body bore the story of someone who had survived when he wasn't supposed to. He had no armor, no weapons of mass death, yet he ruled this cursed forest. Suddenly, a growl broke the air. Kalith swung her gaze to the left. A Vrakar twice the size of the human, armored with bone plates and venomous claws, was moving through the trees. Silent, focused, predatory. The human stood slowly. No panic, no fear. He didn't reach for a gun, he had none. Instead, he picked up a spear, nothing more than sharpened stone on a carved wooden pole. The Vrakar charged on in a flash of movement. The human spun aside. Kalith blinked, and when her eyes opened again, the beast was writhing on the ground, a spear jutting from its eye socket. The human stood over it, breathing heavy, blood dripping down his arm. But then something unexpected happened. He knelt, closed the beast's second eye with his fingers, whispered something again. Kalith's throat went dry. This wasn't just a survivor, he was a warrior, a protector, a force, and something deep in her stirred. She had trained her whole life to be the apex, the top of the hunt. But in him, she saw something beyond skill. She saw meaning. Still watching from above, she whispered aloud to herself, "A male like that deserves a lineage." She startled herself by saying it, and the branch beneath her creaked. The human froze, his head turned, slowly, deliberately, his gaze lifted to her tree. Their eyes met. She hadn't felt fear in years, but now her heart pounded so hard she thought her chest would break. He didn't move to attack. He didn't shout. He just stared. And then, like smoke in wind, he turned and disappeared into the trees. Kalith sat frozen for hours after that, not because she was afraid, but because something had changed. Inside her, a seed of something ancient and personal had taken root. She tapped her communicator. "This is Huntress Kalith. I've made visual contact. Cancel extraction. I require more time." The voice on the other end was sharp. "Your orders are to observe and return. Do not engage." She ended the signal, and whispered to herself, "This is no longer an observation. this is something else. She didn't yet understand what that something was, but she would, because, for the first time in her life, she had found something she didn't want to kill. She had found something worth understanding, someone worth more. The mark of the hunter. The forest changed after that first encounter. Kelith returned to her hidden camp deeper in the ridge, far above the fog line where few creatures dared to climb. She didn't sleep that night, not because of fear but because her thoughts wouldn't stop moving. Every blink brought back the image of him, the way he had looked at her, calm yet sharp, like a blade that had chosen not to cut. The Dominion had taught her many things: how to stalk, how to kill, how to obey, but they had not prepared her for what she felt now. She told herself it was curiosity, tactical interest. The human was dangerous, resourceful. He deserved more study. But deep down, she knew better. She had seen thousands of opponents. None had made her hesitate. None had made her whisper aloud like she had in that tree. Something had been stirred in her bones, so she broke protocol. The next morning, she stripped herself of technovisor, no armor, no signal beacon. She painted her silver skin with ash and green moss to mask her scent. She took only a knife and a cloak made from the skin of a Zevran ghost fox. If she was to follow him, it would be on his terms. For 2 days Kelith tracked the human through the underbrush. She saw the marks he left: scratched tree bark, crushed leaves, balanced stones. None of them were careless. Each was deliberate, coded, like silent messages left for anyone smart enough to read them. Not warnings, not threats, just signs. He was moving, yes, but not aimlessly. He circled, patrolled, even backtracked. This forest wasn't just shelter. To him it was home. He didn't fear the forest obeyed him. On the second night, as crimson light fell through the high branches, Kelith settled beside a stream, the same stream where she had seen him drink days earlier. Her muscles ached from climbing, her hands were scratched. She didn't mind. Then she heard the footsteps, silent, precise, near. She crouched instantly, melting into the reeds. Her heart slowed, her breath grew shallow. But even as she stayed hidden, she knew he had already seen her. He emerged from the darkness without a word. There was no weapon in his hand, no mask on his face, just him. His face was smudged with dirt, his chest smeared with blood and all blood. She hoped. She kept her hands visible. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said softly. She knew he might not understand the language. Still, she tried. He didn't reply, but he watched her with eyes that didn't miss a single movement. Then came the sound, the sharp whistle of wings, a shaped dove from the trees. A Varnock stingbat, 6-legged, fanged, targeting the human's back. Kelith didn't hesitate. In one motion she spun, threw her knife and struck the creature mid-air. It crashed at the human's feet, twitching, dying, then everything blurred. Was on the ground, his knee pressed into her chest. One hand pinned her arm and the other held a stone knife to her throat. His face was inches from hers, wild and fierce. Kelith didn't fight. She raised her free hand, palm open. "I helped," she whispered. He didn't move. His breath was slow and controlled, but his grip was firm. She swallowed. "That thing was going to sting you. It's dead." Still no response. Then his eyes flicked to the fallen bat, back to her. Slowly, so slowly, he eased the knife back. She breathed again. He stood. Kelith sat up, her hands trembling from the speed of it all. Her training had never felt so useless. He had disarmed her with nothing but instinct and speed, but he hadn't killed her. She watched as he walked back to the stream, crouched, and washed his hands as if nothing had happened, as if she were just another tree in the woods. She stood and stepped toward him cautiously. "I don't want to harm you," she said. "I only want to understand." He didn't turn around, but he did reach into a pouch at his side and pull out a scrap of bark. He tossed it at her feet. It was etched, not in letters, in symbols. 2 figures, one crouched, small, the other standing tall, an arrow pointing from the small to the tall. Her eyes widened. "You saw me," she murmured. He nodded once. Kelith held the bark close. It was crude, primitive, but to her it was more than language. It was contact. That night, she didn't leave. She made a small fire nearby, far enough to respect his space, but close enough to feel his presence. He didn't protest. As the fire flickered, he stood and brought over a cooked piece of meat. He placed it gently on a flat stone and stepped away. Gift. She accepted it without words. They ate together, separately, in silence, but it was a silence filled with meaning. When she glanced at him again, his gaze wasn't sharp anymore. It was watching, measuring, curious. And for the first time, Kelith smiled. He didn't smile back, but he didn't look away either. She whispered into the fire, not expecting him to understand. "I think I was sent to find a danger, but maybe I found something far more dangerous. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small medallion, the crest of her house. Carefully, she placed it on a nearby rock, a sign of trust. The human glanced at it, then he looked at her. She could have sworn something flickered behind his eyes. Then he turned away, vanished into the darkness once more, but he didn't take the food, and he didn't destroy the medallion. Kelith curled up beside the dying fire. Her hand rested on the bark he had carved. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. A language beyond words. The days that followed unfolded like a silent dance between two creatures who spoke in everything but words. Kelith returned each morning to the forest clearing, sometimes finding remnants of his camp, sometimes nothing but freshly laid stones arranged in strange patterns. They weren't random, they were messages. She began to understand them, not with logic, but with instinct. A triangle of stones meant watching. A single feather placed near a hollow tree meant danger past. A broken twig, shaped into a cross, meant don't follow today. He was guiding her, testing her, teaching her, perhaps, or simply choosing not to vanish. Kelith had never felt so alive. She had hunted creatures that dissolved in acid, faced storms that burned the ground, and tracked invisible predators across dead planets. But none of it had stirred her like this, because this wasn't a hunt, it was something deeper. She spent her nights sketching everything. She observed his traps, his tools, his markings. She even began copying his methods, building fire without tech, catching small animals with snare vines. She slept lighter now, closer to the ground, tuned to the rhythms of the forest. Her senses sharpened in ways no implant could achieve. And then one evening he returned, not just passing by. He walked directly into the clearing where she sat sharpening a piece of stone. Kelith looked up slowly, not moving, not speaking. He had something in his hand. He knelt before her and placed it on the moss between them. A leaf, not ordinary. It had been dried, painted with crushed berries. Upon its surface, etched with careful lines, was an image her, and beside her, another figure, him. They stood side by side, facing a looming shape that looked like a ship or fortress, but their hands were joined. Kelith stared, her breath catching. She glanced up at him, but his face was unreadable. She picked up a stick and began to draw in the dirt, a smaller version of the same scene herself. Him, the looming threat, but this time, a fire between them, and above it, a symbol of two stars joined. His eyes narrowed slightly. Then he reached out and circled the fire. He tapped it once. Understood. The fire meant unity, trust. Kelith pointed to herself and whispered, Kelith. He didn't react. She pointed to him, palm open. He stared at her for a long time. Then, slowly, he pressed a hand to his chest. He picked up a tiny rock and crushed it in his fist, letting the dust drift down. His gaze held hers, and he nodded. Calith frowned, trying to understand. Was the dust a name, a symbol? Then she realized it was a feeling, a past, destroyed, a self left behind. You don't use your name anymore, she said softly. It was taken, or you gave it up. He didn't answer, but his silence said everything. She leaned forward, slowly, and placed her own hand over the spot where he had touched his chest. Then she pressed her fingers to the soil, marking a line. You are not dust, she whispered. You're still here. The human blinked. Then, for the first time, he gave her something she hadn't expected, a smile. It was small, barely there, but it was real warm, and it made her chest tighten in a way no blade ever had that night. They didn't build separate fires. They sat beside one. He showed her how to heat rocks and bury them in a pit to smoke meat without burning it. She showed him how to use certain leaves to keep wounds from festering. They didn't speak the same language, but they no longer needed to. At dawn, she woke to find him gone again, but this time he had left behind a new gift. It was a carving made from bone, a pendant shaped like a flame. At the center, a tiny hollow filled with crushed blue flower, the scent of which calmed fear. She wore it instantly. Later that day, the forest changed. The birds stopped, their chattering. The air grew tighter, heavier. Kelith's ears twitched. She felt it before she saw it: vibration through the soil, tremors. She climbed a tree swiftly, eyes scanning the canopy. Then she saw it, a black dot in the sky, growing larger, descending fast. A Dominion ship, not small like before. This one was a warcraft, armored, unmarked. She dropped to the ground, heart pounding. They were coming, not to study, not to negotiate, to take. Kelith ran. Her body moved with speed born of panic, but her mind remained sharp. She knew where he would be. where he had always returned after long absences, the waterfall cave hidden behind the veil of vines near the eastern ridge. It took her an hour to get there, but when she arrived, he was already waiting, standing at the edge of the water, barefoot, bare-chested eyes staring at the black dot above the trees. She slowed, breathing hard. "They're coming for you," she said, not to ask, to claim. He didn't turn. She stepped beside him, close enough to feel the heat off his skin. "You have to go." Still no reaction. Caliph reached into her satchel and pulled out a Disca holographic map she'd hidden from command. She flicked it open and showed him the terrain. "Here," she pointed. "There's a gorge. Deep old mining tunnels. You can hide. Escape through the cliffs." The human looked down at the map, then at her, then shook his head. Caliph frowned. "Why?" He stepped away and began dragging his fingers through the mud beside the waterfall, drawing shapes, not escape routes, traps. He looked back at her, his face fierce and steady. "I'm not running," he said, in low, rough, common tongue. Caliph stepped back, stunned. He had spoken clearly, fluently. "You speak," she gasped. He nodded once. "Always could, just no one worth speaking to." Her throat tightened. "I came to warn you," she said. "And you did," he replied. "Now stay out of the way." "But," she shook her head. "I won't, not this time." He narrowed his eyes. "This fight isn't yours." She met his gaze without fear. "It is now." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he did something unexpected. He reached up and pressed the bone flame pendant she wore with 2 fingers. "You kept it," he said. Caliph whispered. "You gave it." He nodded. "Then we fight." And just like that, something ancient passed between them. Not a command, not a request, a bond not of royalty, not of empire, of equals, and the forest, as if listening, trembled once more, because war was coming, and they would meet it side by side. They came to take him approx 1,000 words. The warship cut through the sky like a black blade, its hull reflecting no light, its engines muffled by cloaking tech so advanced it left no trail, just dread. It didn't land in the open. It pierced the canopy, snapping trees in its path, shaking the very bones of the forest. The Dominion wanted to send a message. They weren't asking. They were here to collect. Inside the armored ship, 8 elite enforcers stood ready, clad in obsidian exosuits lined with kinetic armor and guided by neural reflex maps. They were bred to subdue, not negotiate. They carried plasma tethers, electro-lancers, and if needed, kill orders. Their target was one human male, but not just any male, a creature the Dominion now called the Ghost of Z. As the ramp dropped and they stepped onto the soil, the forest itself seemed to shift. Mist hugged the roots, leaves trembled in silence. The trees offered no welcome, that they moved in a diamond formation, scanning every angle, motion sensors pulsing, but they saw nothing. No heat tracers, no movement, just silence. And then, a crack. One of them, Unit Drell, barely had time to register the snapping of a vine beneath his boot before the forest answered. A massive spiked log swung from the trees, smashing into his chest and sending him flying into the underbrush with a bone-breaking crash. "Contact," shouted the team leader, activating his HUD. But another cry cut through the air. The second soldier vanished into a pit, camouflaged with leaves and mud, his suit cracking against ancient stone spikes, buried beneath that. The team scattered, training weapons on every direction. The HUDs began to distort, pulsing with interference. Something was jamming them, not technology, natural resonance. The forest had been shaped to confuse them. No one saw the third strike coming. From above, a flurry of sharpened stones, launched by a vine-drawn pulley, came screaming down like metallic hail. Another soldier fell, his visor shattered, eyes screaming before his head hit the root below. "This isn't a battlefield," growled the 4th soldier. "It's a trap." "No," muttered the leader, scanning the trees. "It's a home." They were in his territory now, and he had prepared it for war. Meanwhile, Caliph moved like breath through the canopy. She wasn't just watching, she was guiding. Using her knowledge of Dominion tactics, she anticipated their movements, whispering warnings through the forest using chirps mimicking the native birds. She had abandoned the idea of capture or diplomacy. That died the moment they arrived, like a hammer swung at glass. This wasn't a test anymore, it was a war of choice, and she had chosen his side. Below, the human moved through the trees barefoot, silent as fog. His body was painted with forest eye streaks of green and black that broke his shape into shadow. In his hand he held no rifle, no blade of plasma, only a handmade spear, its point carved from stone and fire-hardened. He didn't run, he hunted. One by one, the soldiers fell not dead, but broken, disarmed, outsmarted, nets tangled in trees. Launches misfired from redirected signals. One tried to flee and found his boots stuck in resin-laced soil that glued him to the ground. By the time the sixth soldier collapsed, screaming with a shattered knee and broken pride, panic had infected the others. The seventh fired wildly, his visor smeared with blood. The leader barked orders that went unheard, drowned in the sound of snapping branches and breathless terror, and then he appeared. The human. He stepped into their circle, like a ghost made flesh, his chest bare, arms coated with dirt and sweat, muscles coiled with deadly precision. His eyes weren't angry, they were focused, ancient, like the forest had grown him for this exact moment. The last soldier raised his plasma blade. "You think you're a god," he spat. "You're just meat with clever hands." The human didn't answer. He moved forward. The alien slashed. The human ducked, and with one brutal twist of his body, he struck the soldier's gut, twisted the blade from his hand, and slammed his elbow into the helmet with a sound like thunder cracking. The enforcer collapsed, unconscious. Silence returned. One figure remained standing. Kalen. His chest rose and fell. His breath came slow. Not once had he spoken. Keleth dropped from the trees, landing softly beside him. She didn't say anything at first. She looked around at the fallen elite, moaning and groaning in the mud, their weapons useless, their pride shattered. "You didn't kill them," she said softly. "You could have." "I know." She looked at him. His eyes were calm, steady, still full of war, but now layered with something deeper. He turned to her, and then he spoke, slowly, roughly, his voice gravel, but his words clear. "They don't understand what they were hunting." Keleth's breath caught. It wasn't just the words. It was that he had chosen to say them. "They thought you were an animal," she whispered. He looked up at the trees. "They were right," he said, "but not the kind they know." At that moment, Keleth felt it, that line between soldier and something Marit had dissolved. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was choosing, and he had chosen not to be their weapon, their experiment, or their prize. He had chosen freedom. That night they returned to the cave behind the waterfall. She lit the fire, he brought food, and in the flickering light, she finally asked the question that had burned inside her since the beginning. "Why did you stay here, all these years?" Kalen was silent for a long time, then he said, "Because nowhere else would have me here. I became something else, and I thought, maybe that's all I'd ever be." "But you're more now," she said. He looked at her. "I don't know what I am." Keleth leaned forward. "Then let me show you." She took his hand, rough, scarred, calloused, and placed it against her chest, not as prey, not as prize, but as partner. His voice was a whisper now. "I never asked to be wanted, and I never asked to want you," she said, "but here we are." For the first time, the fire between them didn't just burn. It warmed. Outside, the broken soldiers would be collected, reports would be filed, orders would be rewritten, but none of that mattered anymore because something had changed, and the forest of Zevran, once cursed and abandoned, now bore witness to the spark of something no one could command. Not empire, not blood, but bond. A throne denied, a bond declared. The stars over Zevran shone like sharp silver pins, cold and ancient, watching as the quiet night breathed over the wounded forest. Smoke from the last fire drifted softly between the trees, carrying the scent of cooked meat and damped moss. A stillness had returned, but it wasn't the same stillness as before. It was peace. For now, Kalen sat beside the low flames, the light flickering across his scarred back. The silence around him wasn't empty anymore. It was shared. Across from him, Keleth sat cross-legged, sharpening the tip of her obsidian blade, not out of need but out of habit. They weren't speaking, but their presence together said enough. She watched him from time to time, trying to understand what lay beneath that quiet strength. Not just his body, which had endured years of battle and wilderness, but his mind. How it remained unbroken when others would have gone mad. "You still haven't asked me why I came," she said softly. Kalen's eyes flicked up. Keleth continued, "It wasn't orders." "Not really. I volunteered." Kalen didn't look surprised. "They said you were dangerous, a rogue anomaly, that you had no place in Dominion territory." She paused, tracing her finger through the dirt. "But I came because I saw something in the reports, something no one else did." He tilted his head. "You buried your kills, shared meat with animals, built homes out of trees without cutting them down. That's not a savage, that's a soul." Kalen didn't reply at first. Then, finally, he said, "They only saw what they feared, so they never looked deeper." She nodded. "That's what the Dominion does. Label, control, use. And when they can't," he asked, "they claim ownership." She finished. A shadow passed across her face. "And now, they've seen what you are, what you're capable of. You've humiliated their elites, destroyed their pride, You didn't just survive, you made them look small. He stirred the fire with a stick, watching the sparks leap into the sky. Then more will come. She shook her head. No, not soldiers. This time they'll send something worse. He looked up royalty, she said. He said nothing, but the line of his jaw tightened. Keleth reached into her pouch and pulled out a data crystal no bigger than a pebble, but glowing faintly with Dominion blue. I intercepted this before I returned, she explained. It's from Telkara, the Empress herself. She's issued a prime claim. Kalen raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? Keleth met his gaze with steady fire. It means the Empire considers you ideal breeding stock. You've proven superior genes, so they believe you must be paired with royal approval. His eyes hardened. She wants to own you, Keleth said quietly. To use your strength, your blood, to create a new line of elite hybrids. Kalen stood, walking a few paces away from the fire. The wind caught his hair. His fists clenched. Not livestock, he muttered. She doesn't care, Keleth answered. In her mind, you've already been claimed. The fact that you're human only makes it more valuable. They'll parade you like a pet, or a trophy. Kalen turned back. His voice was calm, but the storm lived behind it. Then I'll vanish. Again no, Keleth said firmly. You can't. He blinked. Not this time, she said, rising to her feet. Running would mean she was right that you're something to be taken. But if you stand, if you speak, then you make a choice. One they can't take from you. Kalen's mouth twitched, almost a smile. I've lived alone for years, and now you want me to face an empire. No, Keleth said, stepping closer. I want you to face them as a man, not a myth, not a specimen, and not alone. Their eyes met, and then the sound came low and humming like the groan of a dying planet. A ship, but not like the others. This one was gold, smooth, alive with radiant lights that pulsed in time with the stars above. It drifted downward slowly, almost reverently, as if the forest itself dared not resist its arrival. The Empress's royal envoy. As the vessel settled into a clearing, its ramp extended like a silver tongue. No soldiers marched. No weapons glowed. Instead, a single orb floated outward, glowing with soft blue light. It hovered before Keleth and Kalen, and then played the message aloud, to the one known as Kalen. You are now recognized by the Empress Saraka as prime male. You have the right to choose your partner from the noble lineages of the Dominion. We invite you to the Palace of Telkara. Refusal is not advised. This is not a threat. This is law. The orb pulsed once, then stopped. Kalen said nothing. Keleth took a slow breath. This is your moment. I don't want a throne, he said quietly. No, she replied. You want freedom, then take it. He stepped forward, reached into the dirt, and drew two shapes, himself and Keleth, standing side by side. No chains, no crown, just fire between them. Then he turned toward the floating orb and spoke. I choose no one from your court. A pause. I choose the one who saw me when I was invisible. The one who didn't try to own me. He looked at Keleth. I choose her. The orb flickered, then drifted upward and disappeared into the trees like a defeated ghost. Silence returned. Keleth exhaled shakily. You know what this means, right? They'll come harder next time, he said. She nodded. And they'll come not just for you, but for me too. Kalen stepped close, then let them. He reached down, took her hand, and placed it against his chest. For the first time, she felt the rhythm of his heartbeat, not fast, not nervous, steady, strong, real. I won't run, he said, and I won't leave, she whispered. The fire crackled beside them as the stars watched once again, but this time they did not see a ghost in the forest. They saw something far more dangerous to an empire built on control. They saw two souls who had chosen each other not by breeding, not by bloodline, not by command, but by bond. And no throne in the galaxy could undo that. The Empire strikes with elegance and fire. The decision echoed farther than the trees of Zevran could contain. By the next dawn, Kalen's rejection of the Dominion's royal invitation spread like wildfire, first through encrypted military channels, then into the political ranks of Telkara itself. It wasn't just defiance, it was humiliation. A human unranked, unclaimed, unsanctioned had refused a royal prime claim, and worse, he had chosen a noble huntress outside of imperial order. The Empress Saraka did not rage. She did not scream. She smiled, and that terrified her court more than any war cry. Prepare the scepter, envoy, she commanded coldly, her gaze resting on her advisors. Not to persuade, not to capture, but to observe. Observe what, Majesty? One counselor asked, bowing low. The Empress narrowed her eyes, her voice smooth and dangerous. To see what becomes of a creature who dares to rewrite his fate. Back on Zevran, the forest stirred with new life, though not all of it was natural. Keleth noticed it first, the subtle flicker of mirrored light across the treetops, like heat shimmer that had no source. Then came the faint mechanical clicks in the air, like glass teeth chattering somewhere out of sight. Even Kalen, accustomed to the sounds of life and death in the forest, grew tense. "They're watching," he muttered. Crouched by the creek with his spear in hand, Keleth nodded. "They want to see if you fold under their gaze. If you begin to obey now that you've been seen, but I won't," he said, eyes scanning the brush. "They can't unmake me with mirrors." Despite the tension, Callan and Keleth continued, building their shelter on elegant structure of curved bone and woven bark, perched high between two massive trees. It wasn't a fortress, it wasn't meant to be. It was a home, not hidden in shame, but proud in its purpose. Each day, Keleth taught him more of her world, how to recognize the shifting language of Dominion signals, how to predict their next move based on silence instead of sound. Each night, Kalen showed her his own world, how to speak with animals without making a sound, how to track wind, how to see shadows where there should be none. Their bond grew not just with time, but with the choices they made together. On the fourth night, something changed. A light descended into the heart of Zevran. No ship, no metal, just pure radiance, shaped like a woman, tall and graceful, draped in robes of silver dust. She was not real, not truly. She was a projection, a living message, cast across the stars by the Empress herself. Keleth stood tall. Kalen stood beside her, arms crossed, unarmed yet unshaken. The figure spoke in a voice like bells forged in ice to the anomaly Callan and the traitor Keleth of House Nerja. "I bring not threats, but insight. You defy law, you defy legacy, and yet, I see the root of your defiance." Kalen did not flinch. "Do you?" "Yes," the Empress replied. "Through her living image, you believe your bond makes you free." He said nothing. The Empress continued, stepping closer though her feet never touched the ground. "But freedom is an illusion, Kalen. A forest offers space, not sovereignty. A choice made in isolation is still a cage." Keleth stepped forward. He made a choice with eyes open. "Not in darkness, not in fear. You sent war, and he showed mercy. You sent chains, and he answered with honor." The projection turned to her. "You gave up your title for this." For him, Keleth met the glowing eyes without blinking. "I didn't give up anything. I gained a world." Silence. Then the Empress smiled just slightly. "You would throw away generations of bred perfection for this chaos." Kalen stepped beside Keleth. "It's not chaos. It's creation. Something you've forgotten." The light figure tilted her head. "Then create. Let the galaxy see what you are." With that, the projection blinked out. No warning, no threat, no fleet, but the message had been clear. They would be left alone for now. Kalen exhaled slowly. "That was too easy." Keleth didn't relax. "No, it was tactical." "What do you mean?" "She's letting us be seen, letting the galaxy watch what we become. If we fail, we prove her right that freedom is weakness. If we thrive, others might follow us." Kalen looked to the trees, to the stars between the gaps in the branches. "She's turning us into a test." Keleth nodded. "So we pass." The next weeks were a blend of struggle and strange peace. No soldiers returned, but Keleth picked up new signals: daily drones hidden in insects, eyes embedded in moss, satellites disguised as fallen stars. But they didn't hide from them. They hunted. They built. They danced in the rain when it came, and when the forest howled with storms, they lay in their shelter wrapped in warmth and silence. One morning Kalen woke to find something new carved into the bark of their home, not by his hand, by hers. Two symbols side by side, his mark once carved in rage and survival, hers once inked in legacy and training, now burned into the wood as equals. He touched it gently. Keleth emerged behind him, pressing a flower seed into his palm. "You once told me you lived as a ghost," she said. "I did," he said quietly. "Now plant something." He did. That same evening they stood on the edge of a cliff that looked over Zevran's northern ridges. The Suna triple-haloed orb, in this strange world, sank slowly behind the trees, setting the sky ablaze in golden rose. Keleth stood beside him, her hand laced in his. "You were never meant to be owned," she said, "and you were never meant to obey," he replied. She smiled, resting her forehead against his shoulder. "Then what are we meant to be?" He looked out across the land, the forest, the stars. Real. No crown. No throne, no order, just the voices finally heard. The fire that would not bow the whispers began at the edges of Dominion space, quiet, uncertain, defiant. Some said a human male had turned down the Empress's offer. Others said he had defeated her elite with nothing but traps and bare hands. But what spread fastest wasn't the violence, it was the bond. A hunter and a human, a noble and a ghost. Two beings from opposite worlds, standing side by side, not as master and asset, not as warrior and specimen, but as equals. And the galaxy listened. At first, Telkara tried to silence it. Official channels broadcast Kalen as a primitive, a dangerous anomaly who had simply been tamed by a Dominion agent. They painted Kalith as misguided, or brainwashed, or broken, but the images leaked. A photo captured by a hidden Dronkalin crouched beside a sleeping Kelith, placing a fresh peeled fruit in her hand. Another, the two sparring, laughing, the forest alive with their movement. Then one more powerful of Al-Kalith sitting beneath a tree, resting her head against his chest as he carved their shared symbol into wood. None of these showed war. They showed choice. The Dominion called it disobedience. Others called it hope. And so came the visitors, not warships this time, but individuals. Quiet ships, smaller, cloaked, outsiders, curious minds, dissidents, a healer from the ice moons, a scholar of old rituals, even a soldier who laid down his weapons at the edge of Zevran and asked for no sanctuary, only to watch. Kelith was wary, but Kalen saw it for what it was, the beginning of something, dangerous, and beautiful. But empires do not die with a whisper. They roar when wounded, and one night the roar came. It began with darkness not natural but devouring. A silence deeper than the forest's own. The wind stilled, the sky lost its stars, animals vanished into their dens. And then a ship, unlike any other, broke through the clouds, black as sorrow, smooth as poison, no markings, no signals, just purpose. Kalen saw it first, stepping from their shelter with spear in hand. Kalith followed, her instincts igniting like fire in her veins. This wasn't a scout, it wasn't a test, it was punishment. They're not here to take you, she said. No, Kalen replied. They're here to end what we represent. 8 figures disembarked on soldiers, but something worse. Silent judges, trained from birth to enforce Dominion law without question, without mercy. Their armor was fluid, a living metal that shifted with their breath. No voices, no names, just execution. Kalith's hand trembled. I've only seen them once, she whispered. They're sent when a message must be burned into the galaxy. Kalen stepped forward, bare-chested, eyes calm. I'll face them. But Kalith grabbed his arm. Not alone. He turned to her, a storm behind his gaze. They'll kill you, she smiled. Let them try. They moved together into the clearing, hands empty, hearts full. The judges said nothing, but they moved faster than thought. The battle was not fair, but it was not unwinnable, because Kalen did not fight like a trained soldier. He fought like the forest, like wind cracking bone, like stone refusing to break. He moved through the clearing with precision honed by survival, not simulation. Kalith danced beside him, blades flashing like silver fire, drawing enemy focus, redirecting attacks. Still, the judges were near unstoppable. One struck Kalith in the side, sending her crashing against a tree. Blood bloomed across her ribs. Kalen roared, not in rage, but in resolve. He met the next attacker head-on, caught the judge's blade between his palms, and twisted until it snapped. Then, with a cry that cracked the air, he drove his knee into the creature's helmet, shattering the faceplate. Kalith rose again, bloody but smiling, spinning into another strike. But even as they felled 3, 5 remained, and then, from the shadows another figure emerged, not in armor, not in rage, but in respect. A woman cloaked in grey, her skin marked with the symbols of an outlawed priesthood. One of the watchers who had come weeks ago, her voice carried across the trees. This fight is not just yours anymore. Behind her came more. Not warriors, not rebels, but people. Those who had watched. Those who had heard. Those who had waited for someone to rise first. They did not attack. They stood in silent defiance. The judges faltered for the first time because they were not surrounded by violence, but by unity, by choice. Kalith stepped forward, still breathing, hard, and threw her blade to the ground. No more, she said. We have already won. Kalen followed, placing his spear beside hers. We are not your property. One by one the followers stepped forward, dropping their weapons. Standing tall, the judges hesitated. Their law allowed no failure, but it also recognized momentum. The Dominion didn't fear war, it feared inspiration, and it had already begun. Without a word, the judges retrieved their fallen and vanished into the trees. Silence returned, then laughter, tears. Kalen turned to Kalith, blood still staining his hands. You okay? She nodded, smiling despite the pain. We stood. He touched her forehead gently, pressing his against hers. You didn't just stand, he whispered. You changed everything. In the days that followed, the forest transformed. Not into a city, not into a state, into a sanctuary, not ruled, not owned, shared. Shared. Kalen planted new crops with soil enriched by fire. Caliph trained newcomers, not in combat, but in choice how to protect without dominance. They taught others to build with the land, not on top of it, and at the center of it all stood their home, carved into the great tree, where two marks remained etched into the bark, side by side. One day, while walking the edge of the new paths, Keleth looked up at the stars and whispered, "They still watch." Kalen nodded, "Let them." And when she turned to him, she asked the question she had been waiting to speak aloud, "Would you choose me again?" Kalen looked at her not as a warrior, not as an alien, but as the reason he had found himself again. "I never stopped." Kissed beneath the canopy, and the stars far above winked softly, as if in quiet approval, because in a galaxy obsessed with control, bloodlines and power, two souls had dared to love freely, and in doing so, they had sparked something far more dangerous than war. Hope.